Well, hello hyperspace, my name is Davontos and it's time to get hyped because this is some old Overwatch gameplay. However, in this video we're actually going to talk about something that a lot of Overwatch players are having trouble with, and that's communication. No, it's actually how to deal with the dive comp. Now, communication does play a huge part in this. Overwatch is in a state where nobody wants to listen to each other, everybody wants to do whatever they want, and there's no teamwork, which leads to a lot of losses. However, when there is teamwork, it leads to a lot of victories. That's one thing a lot of Overwatch players gotta keep in mind. Communication, cooperation, teamwork, victory. So, how to counter this dive comp? Everybody's doing a dive comp. You're doing dive comp on attack, you're doing dive comp on defense, for some reason, you're doing dive comp just all over the place. And dive comps are basically when you take heroes who just leap into the battlefield, dish out damage, capture the objective, and win. So you can have, let's say, Winston, Tracer, Genji, Zenyatta, Lucio, people who just jump in there, get the job done, and a lot of people are having problems countering this type of team build. And the reason for that is because everybody's so focused on playing the heroes they want to play, or they just don't take the heroes who can actually counter the dive comp heroes. Let's actually use Winston, for example. Winston is a key hero in dive comp. How do you counter Winston? Reaper. And the reason it's so difficult is because nobody really plays Reaper. Reaper is a tear at close range, and in order to capture the objective, you gotta get in the objective, have Reaper in the objective, which means they gotta get close to Reaper, which means they're gonna have a bad time. However, there are other heroes you can use to counter Genji, to counter Tracer, and just the other annoying heroes, because yeah, Reaper is gonna have kind of a hard time dealing with Genji and Tracer, but the two key heroes that you can use to counter dive comps are the heroes that nobody wants to play. Brace yourself, because these are the two heroes. Oh no! Not a Torbjorn and a Symmetra! That's right! Torbjorn and Symmetra are insanely powerful, especially if they're playing defense. Now again, it depends on the level, but usually dive comps are used in capture points like Hanamura, Volskaya Industries, and so on, and that's where these heroes tend to shine. Symmetra can easily be countered by Winston, but that's where Torbjorn comes in, because Torbjorn can beat Winston. If these two work together, they're going to give most of the dive comping team, an enemy team, a hard time. Symmetra can easily place her teleporter somewhere near the capture point, allowing her teammates to quickly come in without having to be affected too much from their deaths. Torbjorn can toss down armor packs for survivability, don't need Symmetra's shield because you have Torbjorn's armor pack, and everybody knows a Molten Core Torbjorn turret is a deadly, deadly machine. You can actually combine this with other heroes who countered the dive comp heroes. As I mentioned, Reaper is one of them. If you want to counter Tracer or Genji, you can take maybe a Roadhog to catch that Tracer. Counter Genji, well, Genji's going to have a hard time maneuvering around the point with Symmetra's pod turrets there. Same thing with Tracer, so you can toss in a Roadhog just for good measure. You can even toss in a Soldier in case they have a Pharah or even a McCree, just to have a regular DPS out there. And then for a healer, hey, you can have an Ana, you can even have a Mercy for a Resurrect in case Symmetra's teleporter isn't available. There are, including Doomfist, 25 heroes in Overwatch, and doing all of the calculations, there are multiple hundreds of combinations you can come up with. I know there's at least one that can counter dive comp, we just haven't found it yet. But I say this is probably the best way to counter dive comp, because dive comp is all about mobility. If you hamper their mobility, they're going to have a very, very difficult time succeeding. You can kind of look at it like a Call of Duty game. Now, I know Overwatch and Call of Duty are completely different, they play out completely different and so on, but what's happening in the battlefield can be the same thing that happens in a Call of Duty game. Let's actually use domination, for example, in Call of Duty. You gotta capture 3 points. If you want to defend the point in Call of Duty, the best way to do it is by camping. You want to set up your sentry guns, you want to set up your bombs, and you just want to hide and cover and shoot at anybody who's coming in. That's the same thing you want to do in Overwatch. When the dive comp is jumping in there, you just want to hamper their mobility by putting booby traps, putting turrets, and just do whatever you can to stop their mobility, and it always works. I've been in games, in competitive games, and I was actually in, Diamond last season, and there were dive comps coming in, and my team, using communication and mics, we actually did a campy playstyle, and they couldn't even capture the first point. And this works almost all of the time. Of course, it's not guaranteed to win every single game because you will have losses, but if you actually counter the dive comp with a campy playstyle, your losses will not be as frequent as they are if you just play, well, random heroes. And especially do not play a dive comp if the enemies are dive comping, especially if you're defending. Because if you're defending in Hanamura and you do a dive comp, I have no idea where you're going to dive to. It's a really bad choice. So, next time you play Overwatch and you see the enemies are actually using a dive comp, use your mics, try to communicate, try to be nice, because everybody seems to be very tilty and salty in Overwatch. So just try to be nice and try to get them to play very campy. Bastion, as a Torbjorn has said, Symmetra, Reaper, anybody who can just hold the ground and give the enemies a very, very hard time will probably win you that game. But one thing you want to keep in mind when you're defending against a dive comp is that you are campers, therefore you cannot move much, which means you can't jump into the enemies and pull off a little flank here and there depending on who your hero is. I mean, Reaper can do flanks, but it's very risky because he's slow. Torbjorn do not flank at all, same thing with Symmetra. You just want to stay in that one spot for as long as possible, or at least within that general area. Don't stay in that one spot. If you stay in that one spot, you're going to get sniped. Just stay within the general area. Shoot the enemies from coming in, and when they actually get into the point, that's when your camping playstyle comes into play with all your booby traps and whatnot. So, it's a very, very effective playstyle, and the reason I see that a lot of Overwatch players are having trouble dealing with the dive comp is, as I said, they're not taking the heroes who can counter, because even the pro heroes, they all say Torbjorn and Symmetra are troll picks. Well, what if this troll pick can actually be very effective in a dive comp kind of playstyle? It's because basically Torbjorn and Symmetra are going to have this reputation. It's like you take Symmetra and everybody says, "Oh no, you're throwing the game!" That's not the case. Every hero has a purpose and every hero have their strength and weakness. The reason that Torbjorn and Symmetra aren't really used much is because their reputation has put them so low, nobody wants to take them anymore because nobody wants to be seen as a troll. But trust me, I play a lot of Torbjorn and a lot of Bastion. If you position them correctly, they are insanely powerful. It is very difficult for even Torbjorn counters like Soldier to deal with Torbjorn if you're a good shot with Torbjorn himself. Torbjorn's shotgun is actually very, very powerful. If you use the single slug rounds, it does 70 damage to the body, and if you actually use the scatter shot at close range, I believe it does 250 or 300 if you land every single pellet. That's insanely strong. So if you actually master Torbjorn, get him in the right position, he is going to give the enemies a hard time. Same thing with Symmetra. You want to scatter her pods and put her pods in multiple areas around the point, because if you put them in the same spot, you can have just like a Winston dive in there and just electrocute them all at once, or maybe a Tracer just turn around and shoot them all at once. But if they're scattered all around the point, it's going to really, really limit the mobility of the high mobile enemies, especially Genji and Tracer. You try pulling a Genji when the place is surrounded by Symmetra turrets, you're going to have a very, very hard time. On top of Torbjorn's turret constantly targeting you and being repaired by Torbjorn himself. It is going to be a very annoying playstyle for the enemies to deal with, and it's going to be a very powerful playstyle for your team to use. One thing you want to keep in mind is you actually want to keep an eye on who the enemies have, just in case they change their playstyle and they change their comp. You can change your character and counter what they're doing. Dive comp isn't the ultimate playstyle. It can be countered the same way the triple tank meta could have been countered back in the day. We found out how to counter it, and now triple tank meta is nowhere to be seen anymore. It's the same way with dive comp. There is a way to counter it. I say this is a very effective way. Maybe you guys can find another one. Let me know in the comment section below. So if you like this video, punch that like button with a mighty force. You can follow me up on Twitter at Davontos. And as always, I'll see all of you in the next video. Have a nice day.